Hey, I know why you are here. The explanation on how the auction system on Boardgame Arena works is in the timestamps. You're welcome. Hi everybody and welcome to a new episode of Paiagroject, the unofficial podcast for the board game Gaia Project. I am Matteo, El Temblo, and this is an episode that I have been wanting to do for a long time, for a lot of time, because this is a topic which constantly returns in the discussions between Gaia Project nerds, and it is also one of those that calls for very strong opinions, which are as strong as they cannot be demonstrated, of course. So, what are we talking about? Well, we're basically talking about balancing mechanisms. Why is that? Is Gaia Project an imbalanced game? Well, overall, no, it isn't. It is very balanced. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here playing hundreds of games, literally hundreds of games on this span of years. But it is somehow imbalanced because Gaia Project, being a Eurogame with a variable setup, is imbalanced within the game. This means that each game is imbalanced in its own way. And so it is up to the players to read the situation and take advantage of it. That said, there are other issues, such as player order. Player order can have an impact because, well, the first player will choose the best faction, will likely choose the best faction, best suited for the specific game, while the last player will exclusively have the consolation prize of choosing the round booster. So, what does the manual say in this regard, by the way? This is where the problems start, because let's look at the 3 or 4 players setup. The manual says, use all 10 space sector tiles and place sectors 5, 6 and 7 solid side up. Okay, we know that. Fine. Method 1. Place space sector tiles 1 through 4 as described in the basic setup. So basically in the center of the board. Then randomly place tiles 5 through 10 to create the same board shape as the basic setup. Rotate each tile as you choose. Method 2. Randomly place space sector tiles 1 through 4 in the same orientation as in the basic setup. Then randomly place tiles 5 through 10 to create the same board shape as the basic setup. Rotate each tile as you choose. Method 3. Randomly place all of the space sector tiles to create the same board shape as the basic setup. Okay, we now understood that the shape of the board is the same as the basic setup. Okay, that's fine. Rotate each tile as you choose. So now here we are presented with the 3 different methods for creating the map. Okay, the first problem is that there is not a right way to arrange the map and the factions in Gaia Project. So we generally tend to adopt the method number 3. And I'm talking about online gaming, of course, because there are infinite ways to play in person. But in general, on the 3 main platforms, we tend to play with the random place sector tiles. So that's quite obvious, to be fair, and that's for the sake of variety, because after tens, hundreds of games, you really need to shake things up as much as possible. Okay, so we have our 10 sectors placed randomly, and generally we do that unless we're playing on Tabletop Simulator. There's an algorithm which does that for us. The computer does that for us. And now we have to choose which factions we are playing, which is absolutely not obvious as well. And, well, at this point, things get complicated. Because, as we said, the first player to choose has an advantage because they're choosing the faction which is the best suited for this specific game, while the last one has this sort of consolation prize which usually does not equal the faction pick. Because, okay, I can have the best booster in the world, but if I have Gleans and you have Ivits in a setup which is not 100% completely favorable to Gleans, this is going to be a one-sided match, and we all know that. Okay, so first thing first is that there is no correct way to set up a game of Gaia Project, and there is no correct way to choose the factions in Gaia Project. Also, the number of factions among which we can choose is absolutely not a given. There is nothing which prevents us from picking from all the factions available in the game. And by the way, that is how I have played for a very, very, very long time. And I can tell you there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Anyway, we as a community of players have always felt the need for an approach to the game, an approach to faction choosing, which would have been the most balanced possible, which would have given the least advantage to the first player or the last one to any player, so that it would be the gameplay to decide who is the best for that evening, for the single game. Let me get this straight. There is absolutely no way to clear this phase from the game. Picking a faction according to the setup is absolutely crucial for the outcome of the game, and it is a small sub-game on its own. So this is, and always will be, and it's absolutely fine that it is, an integral part of the game, and I recommend you to enjoy that. However, with time we have seen that not all factions were equally chosen, at least not in comparable quantities. Hadchalas were almost never picked because the other side of the red board was far too strong. Nevlas suffered a similar fate, which I personally cannot comprehend, but who cares, it's just me. And also Lantids, which is weird on its own, because Lantids are very different from Terrans regarding their abilities and setups where they can shine. The problems, in my opinion, start to appear when you limit the number of factions available. Because if all factions are at your disposal when you pick them, you really don't feel the need to balance the cost of them somehow, because you should be well set anyway. What usually happens when you have all factions at your disposal is that sector rotation is implemented, and the player who has to rotate the sectors as they wish is the last one to pick the faction. This is because the last player can check out and, so to say, correct imbalances in the random map formation, so that they won't be left with a faction that has no chance of competing against factions which are more fit to that specific setup. I want to say it right at the beginning here. I am a fan of this kind of setup. All factions at your disposal, the last player rotates the sectors. This is a method which presents some disadvantages, as every other method does, and this is important to keep in mind, but it's by far my favorite because it gives players more agency, in my opinion, and also does not restrict your picks to just a selected bunch of factions. However, sector rotation is technically not a mechanism of faction selection, because it tells you nothing on how the faction will be picked this specific game, because they can be picked among all of them. They can be picked among a restricted pool of factions, which can be selected by the players through bans, which is something that exists, and can also be done among a pool of factions which the computer has randomly generated and is proposing them to you. But sector rotation is still a balancing mechanism somehow, because the last player has the opportunity to create a map which is favorable or unfavorable for some specific factions, therefore forcing other players to make some choices. It is something that should not be taken lightly. It requires some experience with the game, and also is completely on the last player. So these are also the basis for the most recurring critiques to this method of balancing, because it is all up to the last player. So if the last player does not know what they're doing, is at the first games, or just makes some mistakes and doesn't see some specific advantage for some specific faction, they can still create a very imbalanced game towards the first player, who can pick a faction according to this specific setup, while the other ones have no hope of competing. But this view is a bit too deterministic in my way. I don't like views which are too deterministic in general, but whatever. The focus of this episode is still on auctions. What are auctions? Well, auctions almost never appear in the rules of the games, but when it comes to heavy Euro games such as Gaia Project, which have variable powers and variable setups, a very common way of trying to rebalance things within a single games is the use of auctions, is bidding. How does that work? Well, the factions, which can be selected among all of them, or among a restricted pool, when bidding, it generally doesn't make much sense having all factions available. So auctioning is basically always done within a restricted pool of factions that corresponds to the number of players in that game. So if this is a 4-player game, the computer will pick a random set of 4 factions in real life or also when playing online. The factions can be picked by the 4 players. There are several ways to do so. And then the auction starts. There are 2 auctioning mechanisms which I know of. The first one is a classic round bidding between players. So all factions start at 0. The first player bids, say, 0 points on one faction. Then it comes to the second player, which can bid on another faction for 0, or can bid 1 on the same faction as the first player. Then it comes to the third player, which can bid 2 on the same faction, or can bid 0 on another one, and so on and so on. What are they bidding? Well, of course, they are bidding victory points. This can be calculated at the end of the game, or the player who paid the most can start at 10, and then the other players will have their initial scoring adjusted to that. This is how it happens on Boardgame Arena, for example. But that's basically the same. So this is kind of a classic auctioning mechanism. It has advantages and disadvantages, but we will talk about them later. The second type of auction, which everybody is puzzled about always, is the one on the official app and on Boardgame Arena. Is an automatic type of auctioning. It is important to know, by the way, that when you bid on factions, your round order as a player is just impactful for the order when you will place the bet. Usually the factions are picked already in the round order. So when I bet, say, on Taclons, I know that Taclons will be the second ones to play, for example. This is important because so you can appraise also the relative value of the factions in this context with those round boosters and with their opportunity to pick any one of them. But now let's talk the one everybody wants to know about, which is the auctioning on Boardgame Arena. Boardgame Arena has implemented an auctioning mechanism which, in the words of the developer Kaivon, it was approved by, well, he doesn't explicitly say that, but there is a message which literally says, we have also been in touch with the publisher to receive approval of these optional features. I suppose that implies that Feuerland told them, okay, but it doesn't surprise me too much. Regardless of the type of auction, Helge also told us that for competitive play, he saw auction as a balancing mechanism. See episode 12 of paiagroject if you're interested. Okay, how does Boardgame Arena auction work? At the beginning of the game, where the auction is implemented, you will have a set of factions to choose from. You will have as many factions as the number of players in the game, and they will already have a starting position. Say, I don't know, Nevlas position 1, Baltax position 2, Glins position 3, stuff like that. What do you have to do? You have to bid for the maximum amount, more on this later, you are willing to pay for each faction. Then the automatic auction starts behind the screen, so you will see nothing about this, but there will be a log of that afterwards. And then you will receive a random faction for which you will understand absolutely nothing on why you paid that amount of points. Because what happened? Okay, how does this work? It works like this. Players will be assigned an auction order at the beginning of the auction. Once they have submitted the total they are willing to pay for each faction, you have to submit the total for all of them. So in the former example, let's say, I don't know, player A, El Templo. He bids 30 on Nevlas, 5 on Gleans, and of course 0 on Baltax. Player B, I don't know, Morpho, bids 5 on Nevlas, 10 on Gleans, yeah, he's Mr. Glean, and 0 on Baltax. Of course, again. Player C, Babuk, bids 10 on Nevlas, 0 on Gleans, and 10 on Baltax. Okay, now, what happens is that the system starts with the first player in order, in this case El Templo. And this is very important, please bear with me, and checks the maximum difference of the amount that player is willing to pay in order to have each faction, and then automatically place a bid of 0 points on the faction which totals the highest difference between the current bid and the maximum amount. In this example, it places El Templo 0 points on Nevlas because he is willing to pay 30 points for Nevlas, and so 30 minus 0 equals 30, the highest difference. So El Templo is currently bidding 0 on Nevlas. It then passes to player B, which is Molfo. Molfo bids 5 on Nevlas and 10 on Gleans, 0 on Baltax, of course. Well, now the system sees that the maximum difference between the bids from Molfo are 10 for Gleans, because the current bid is 0 for Gleans, and so 10 minus 0 equals 10. Molfo is now bidding 0 on Gleans. Now it is the turn of Babuk. Babuk bids 10 on Nevlas, which currently have a bid of 0 on from El Templo, and also 10 on Baltax, on which no one has bid. Now what happens is that the system has a tie, because there are 2 factions at 0. But the system also sees that El Templo is currently bidding on Nevlas, so the system decides that Babuk will be placed for 0 on Baltax. So the outcome is that all players get their factions for 0 points, because regardless of the amount they bid, all of them had the highest difference between how much they were willing to pay and the current bid. Now, in case that, let's say, Babuk had bid, I don't know, 15 on Nevlas, the system would have bounced between the two, so that now Babuk would be bidding 1 on Nevlas. It now returns to El Templo, who is willing to pay 30 for Nevlas. So he's currently paying 0, but the current bid is 1 on Nevlas by Babuk. So the system says, okay, there's a difference of 29 points between El Templo's bid and the current bid. So he automatically places a bid of 2 on Nevlas for El Templo. It now returns to Molfo, who is bidding on Gleans. His bid for Nevlas was 5, the difference is 3. The current difference between Gleans and the current bid is 0, so he stays on Gleans. Keep in mind that players are never skipped. This is how it works, so it will check every time. Okay, of course, it is unlikely that a player will return on an auction for a different faction in a situation like this, but it can happen. Now it returns to Babuk, who is willing to pay 15. Current bid on Nevlas is 2, so there's a difference of 13, and so he will bid 3. Back to El Templo, 4 on Nevlas, of course, the difference is very high. Now, the current difference between Babuk willing to pay and the current difference is 11, so Babuk now bids 5 on Nevlas. When it returns to El Templo will be bidding 6 on Nevlas. Back to Babuk, okay, because Molfo still is bidding on Gleans. Now, Babuk has a difference of 9 between the current bid on Nevlas and he's willing to pay 10 for Baltax. So now the system switches Babuk to Baltax, who is bidding 0 because nobody is bidding on them at the moment. Now back to El Templo, who is still bidding on Nevlas because there's a difference of 24 between his bid and current bidding. And so this is the final state of the auction. El Templo gets Nevlas for 6 points, although he bid 30 on them. Molfo gets Glins for 0, and Babuk gets Baltax for 0, even if both of them bid 10 on the respective factions. I hope this cleared up things a bit. So this is why this mechanism, this behind the scenes, is why you often get factions you were not expecting on Boardgame Arena, and also for values which you were absolutely not expecting. This happens all the time. I have recently finished a game where I bid 35 on Ivits and I got them for like 3 points, stuff like that. I will return on this game because it's a good example of my point against auctions. I'm spoiling this right now. So I hope this was useful. And now time for opinions. I don't like auctions. We have always been vocal about this. I don't like auctions because of 2 reasons. The first reason is that auctions like the classical one, the classic auction, how it is implemented on Boardgamer Space, for example, where I bid 1, okay, now your turn, okay, no, you bid 2, my turn. Am I willing to pay 3 for this faction? Okay, why not? Let's pay 3, now your turn. Are you paying 4 for Taclons, or you will just get Lantids for 0? No, I'm willing to pay 5, and so on, and so on, and so on. This auction has the big advantage of being very transparent. Players always have the situation under control. They always know what is happening. It basically makes Gaia Project remain a game of perfect information, which is what it is at its core, isn't it? But on the other hand, it has an intrinsic flow, which I'm going to talk about later. And also, when you are playing a turn-based game, this can become really long and tedious. What often happens is that players get tired because it can take, and often does, take days of bidding and counter bidding and then bidding again on different factions on a game before the game itself starts. And that's a problem because a lot of games are played this way and not in real time. Again, the advantage is that it keeps the game a game of perfect information. The Boardgame Arena type auction is very weird and unique. It has the opposite advantages and disadvantages because it is instant. Once all players have sent their biddings, the system gives them their factions in a second, and that's great because, I mean, time is the only one resource we cannot get more of, right? On the other hand, of course, it saves a lot of time, but you have basically no idea what you are doing, especially the first times. You never know how much people are willing to pay for each faction. It is a wild guessing game, which can go in very, very weird directions. People do crazy stuff all the time with these auctions. You can end up paying a lot for a faction you are not really convinced of because of some weird change of bids during the automatic auction. And you can also end up, as it recently happened to me, having a great faction, really a killing faction, for nothing or the like. So it can be very, very weird. Also, in that moment, which is a crucial moment of the game, Gaia Project with this auction mechanism stops being a game of perfect information, and it by all means opens a new small subgame of guessing where you start imagining what other people are thinking, what are they willing to pay, and so on and so on. But and I mean, I want to be clear on this again. I like this kind of games, but they are not Gaia Project and they are not Terra Mystica. These games are not like that. Of course, you are trying to guess what the other players are going to do, but you are based on, say, an actual map situation. an actual tech track situation, not on a wild guess of are they seeing this opportunity? Are they not? How much are they willing to pay? Are they crazy? Because if you are playing against me or people like Arielito, hi guy, we are crazy, man. We really are crazy. We are doing stuff you're not expecting. And yeah, is it still Gaia Project? I don't think so. It really looks like it's not to me. This is like my main, not a complaint, but my main perplexity. Now, also, here comes the big point of this episode. I think, I solidly think, it is my solid opinion that all auctions are meaningless. Auctions just don't work. They are not a useful balancing mechanism. They will never be, and they do not help the outcome of a game to be as independent as it can be from chance. Here's why. In theory, all auctions work perfectly. They work great, at least, because, okay, we see the situation at the start of the game, we see the imbalances which are bred in this game, we see the situation, and we know that, I don't know, of these three factions, one is going to be great in this setup, one is going to be terrible. And so we say, okay, I think that you should pay way more points in order to get this faction so that we also get a fair chance, right? Yeah, right, in theory. Point is that, okay, let me start from some data. In my whole gaming experience, and I have played a lot of games, like a lot, hundreds of games. I have seen in total, I think like 2 games where the points which were paid for bidding made any difference. 2. Recently, I said this in the Discord channel. Robin Hood told me, hey, here's another game where this worked, right? And now I say, great man, thank you. There are 3. There are 3, I think we're around less than 1%. So, okay, that's fine. I think that's a balancing mechanism which works all the time. But aside from this, the problem with auctions is that you like them a lot because the auction in itself basically seduces you. It tells you, hey, you sexy, super good Gaia Project player, I know that you know how to appraise a game. I know that you know that in this very specific game, ITARs are going to be worth like 40 points. So it's all in your hands. You can change the conditions of this game. You can decide how much they're worth, and so with your great knowledge, you're going to balance things. Okay, let's bid, honey. But this is all false. The problem is that actually it is impossible to assess how much a faction is worth at the beginning of a game. Like, this is literally impossible. I think you have to be to a level of intelligence, of like artificial super intelligence, in order to get an accurate estimate of how much every single faction is worth in a given game. And even in that case, the path to get to there is just too chaotic in order for your appraisal to be reliable, somehow reliable. It is completely impossible for anyone to say this faction is worth X. Now, if you disagree with me, please stop for a moment and think about this. Ask yourself, can I really differentiate between a bidding of 35 or 40 points? Can I really discriminate between bidding 40 or 50 for a faction? Please be honest with yourself. Don't tell me, but please, seriously. Do these numbers mean anything to you? Because after a certain point, they're all the same. But also between 5 and 10, what's the difference? How much are you going to value Ambas in this game on Firax, say? How many times do you win by 2 or 3 points, and how many games are won by 20 or 30? Okay, if we talk about super high level leagues, there was at least the Gaia Project Tournament League. By the way, Fadi, Zoras, guys, keep it up. I want to play again in those. But anyway, if you're playing about super high level, Okay, maybe auctions can be worth something. And who cares? I don't know how important that is, that, say, the top 20 players in the world can have a perfectly balanced mechanism. It's not perfectly balanced, but the point is that they are good at the game, so they are also good at auctioning. But I don't think, the problem is that I don't think that auctioning really helps people learning the game. It can be good for, again, super top level tournaments, but not for regular gaming. And this is becoming a standard, and I hate it. The other thing that I don't like is that there are a lot of tournaments, a lot of competitive play setups, where the default mechanism for picking factions is auctioning. So if you like auctions, the world is your oyster. You can play as much as you want, the way that you like, and that's great, your life is fantastic, and so on. But nobody is organizing tournaments where players rotate sectors and then choose among, I don't know, a pool of factions where there were bans, a pool of factions where now we ban factions and then we pick complete pool of factions. I don't know. There are basically no options for competitive play if you like rotations. And I don't like this. And and it could be that at some point I will say, you know what? Now I will have my own tournament with blackjack and you know what? And rotation. Because I have played years with sector rotation and then free choice between the all the factions in the game. And I can guarantee you that that is fantastic. Why do I have to choose between best gods and geodens and gleans in this game if I really, really want to play Hadshalas? Why do I have to do so? And why do I have to assess how much Firax will be worth in this game? You know what? I have no idea, because I don't know how good of a player you are, and I don't know what actions you will pick during the first, say, 2 rounds, but also later. Also, the main argument against rotation, which is one player decides it all, is also valid for auctions. You fool yourself if you think that auctions give equal opportunities to all players, because a million times I have participated in auctions where I got the super best factions for that specific settings for nothing. And so, okay, maybe if there is a player who is at their first games and will not counterbid on a faction which is very, very favored in that specific setting, will create some imbalances, and the other 2 players, so let's say we're playing 4, can counterbid up to a point for a given faction. And now the specific disadvantages of the 2 types of auctions come into play, because if we are bidding 1 point, 1 point, 1 point, and so on, I offer, you offer, you offer, I offer, and so on, how long are we going on this? When are we stopping? When our emotions start to take on and I say, no, this is too much. Why is it 25 too much? Why is it 25 good and 27 too much? And also, if I think that my maximum bid for this faction is 40 and you bid 41, what am I going to do? How long are we going on with this? When too much is too much? So, in conclusion, I want to say that I don't think that the perfect mechanism exists, but I think that they all have disadvantages, but I am 100% sure that having auctions as a default is not good, is not the perfect way, is not does really not have to be given. I really don't like that. That's the point. Oh, sorry, I almost forgot. If we are playing with the Boardgame Arena style auction, well, things really start losing any meaning to me, because I really cannot take the everybody has some agency argument. That's literally impossible. Come on. I recently bid, I think 25 on Gleans and I didn't get them. Stuff like that. Why is that? Why? That really means that sometimes I am bidding, I don't know, as it happened, 35 on Ivids and I'm getting them for 3. How can that make any sense, like, at all? At all. Also, I promised that I would be talking about that game. I won by 48 points. 48. I bid 35 for them. Okay, maybe mistakes were made. Maybe, for sure, my opponents didn't play the best, that's fine. Okay, everything you want. But how on earth are you supposed to bid even remotely close to that number before a game starts? I just don't believe it. I just don't buy it. However you want, but I don't buy it that auctions are a balancing mechanism. I would like to see more rotation games. That's the rotation with free choice. Guys, can we try to organize a high-level tournament, a very competitive tournament, where the fourth player rotates all sectors, and then the players take the faction they want? Oh, but they will always take Ivits and Itars. Okay, let's see. Can we see it? You have no idea how many times I have won against Ivits and Itars with so-called subpar factions in these conditions. Because the map becomes crucial. And often people really underestimate these minor, between inverted commas, factions, such as Beskals can be devastating in the good setting, especially if I am picking fourth and I know that there are no brown and no white factions. Just an example. Okay, my rant is over. I really would like to know what you think, and I really would like to hear from players who are not the usual veteran players, because for as how much I love them, I already know their opinions. So I would really like to have some feedback by, let's say, less experienced players. Now, let's say you are in the current arena season, or in any competitive setting where auctioning is there. What are some suggestions that I can give you? Let me provide you some value with this episode. Here are my thoughts after I won the old international tournament and after a lot of games with auctions. If the auctioning is the, let's say, traditional one, listen to yourself up to a measure. Set yourself a maximum amount that you really think that you're willing to pay and try to stick to it. But also, if you really want a faction that badly, do not hesitate to bid way more than you hoped for. Because other players are not stupid, and if you are confident in your ways, pay more points for that faction. Of course, you really have to decide, but my firm belief is that if you feel like playing a given faction, you will perform way better than you would if you are playing a, say, optimal faction for the setup, but that you do not want to play. If I am in the mood of playing Nevlas, which I often am, I would every day pick Nevlas over Ivits in a given setup. Of course, it depends. If things are very favorable for Ivits, then I don't know. I'm willing to play Ivits. Players first. This is an aspect which is always underrated. Player first. If you want to play Lantids, who cares? Just pick Lantids. You will pay them like nothing, so that's fine. The other suggestion that I am willing to give is to not play games during the auction. Okay, I'm bidding on Ambas because that player cannot pay for them too low, and so I bid them, because you will be hurt a lot of times. If you think that somebody will pay, say, Ambas not enough, do not counterbid on them, because you absolutely have no certainty that they will counterbid you, and you can end up playing with a faction that you do not want to play, and also you paid maybe quite an amount of victory points in order to do so. So the situation you end up into is that you play a faction that you do not want to play, and you also had to pay for that. If you're willing to play a faction which is suboptimal in that setting, feel free to take it, and that's it. Who cares? Take it. Just take it. If you feel like that, you likely have seen some openings. You have seen some opportunities to score. Of course, you could be gambling as well, but that's up to you. I don't know. So in the end, my two suggestions for general auctions are: first and foremost, pay more if you want to play a faction, and do not play games on factions that are not the one you want to play, because you will end up playing a game that you hate, and this game is long and life is too short. So don't play games where you have bad factions, which are bad for you, I mean. Now, suggestions for Boardgame Arena style auction. This is messy, this is hard, this is difficult. First, think thoroughly about your bid, because that's very important and you will have no second chances. Always remember, keep in mind that the auction works on differences between the highest amount of points you're willing to pay for a given faction and the current bid. So if you really want to play with a faction, bid high on that. Bid 25, bid 30. It is likely that you will end up paying less for that faction. In this type of auction, I give you permission to play a bit more games, because I am not letting you play Ivits by paying them nothing. I am bidding, I don't know, at least 10 on Ivits, at least 15. But keep in mind that the differences between all of your bids cannot be too high, because if you are paying, say, if you're bidding, say, 10 on Ivits and then you are bidding 25 on Lantids, which are your real pick, you will stop bidding on Ivits quite early. So this auction is very, very, very tricky, very tricky. Try to be clear with yourself on what you want, bid high on that, bid something on other factions, but try to keep all your bids as consistent as possible. Say 25 for your favorite faction, 20 and 20. I have to test a lot on this type of auction, but I think that something that could work is to bid with a small difference between the different factions, but with sky-high values. Say, in this game, I barely want to play Nebulas, but there are also Ivits and Taklons in play. So I bid 45 on Nebulas, then I bid 40 on Ivits and Taklons. So all my opponents will have to pay their whole bid in order to play with these factions, and then once they are there, I can pick Nebulas for like a reasonable amount of points. This could work, I don't know. This type of auction is really dangerous, so experiment, let's talk about this, give me feedback, tell me how it went and how things go for you with these auctions. Okay, it's done. I am happy to have finally made an episode about this, so I can stop talking about this in the Discord channel. I can just say, hey, there's a whole episode, listen to that. My ideas are likely not to change. Again, tell me what you think. Thank you for listening. I want to issue 2 special thank yous to people this week. The first thank you goes to Acanto Scurria for the messages. He knows, I know. Thank you, man. That was appreciated. And also, thank you to Kappa for his or her incredible marathon of listening to all of our episodes, leaving comments to all of them on Spotify. Thanks, and also giving us a donation. Thanks a lot. I really appreciated that. That was really fun and amazing, and I love you. But I love you all, whether you like auctions or not, it doesn't matter. Thanks a lot for listening. And please keep in mind that you can contribute to the show by donating through Ko-fi. Everything is in the episode description. You can and should leave a rating for this podcast on Spotify or your app of choice. That's absolutely fine. Please give us 5 stars. You can also give me 5 stars by writing El Temblo doesn't know anything about auctioning. He's a bad player, but I really like his show a lot, so who cares? 5 stars. I would love that. Please do it. And you can still get our paiagroject t-shirts, link in description. Still love them. I have to buy another one myself because one has some holes in that. My cat destroyed that. Anyway, in the end, let me apologize to everyone. I announced the streaming a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, on Sunday, September the 1st, and it failed miserably because my computer couldn't do that. I tried that. I started this Lost Fleet game with Fadi B, Joffrey, and Babuk. Thank you guys. That was really fun. I tried to start the streaming and my computer immediately crashed. Everything burned up. No, it was all right, but I really have to get a new desktop computer so I can do that because my laptop at the moment absolutely cannot handle that. Sorry for being naive. Sorry for my noobness on this. but I will start streaming. That's a promise. That's something I want to do. So that will happen. Sorry, bot for letting you down. That won't happen again. He was there like waiting for the stream, but yeah, sorry man, I will do that. Okay, so once more, thanks a lot for listening to this episode of Paiagroject, and hear you the next time. Bye!